I got to play Star Wars Outlaws for about 4 hours, so I got a pretty good idea of what this game is going to be. If you're wondering how open this game really is, what it plays like, or makes it different from other similar looking open world games, I should have you covered. Before we jump in, thanks to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. You can pre-order the game now by clicking the link in the description below. So here's a general overview of what I played. The first 3 hours I spent on the desert planet Tashara, doing linear missions to advance the story. Outside of the first mission, I was told I could do whatever I wanted, so I explored some of the open world areas on my speeder, I played one of the mini games, and I just wandered around the environments. For the final hour, they loaded me to a different save on the snowy planet of Kijimi for a specific story mission. Star Wars Outlaws is the first ever open world Star Wars game, and it focuses on the scoundrel fantasy, which we also haven't really seen before. Kay Vess is an enterprising outlaw who, along with her trusty companion Nyx, stole the wrong thing from the wrong person. Now she has to work with the many crime syndicates in the Outer Rim to take out her pursuer and earn her freedom. And from what I've played, the game really leans into that fantasy, not just in her story, but in the choices you get to make. In the 4 missions I played, every single one had me making decisions that would impact my standing with the various criminal networks. Take this first mission, for example. I had to infiltrate the Pike's base to recover some valuable intel. At the end, I could give it to the client who hired me for the job, or I could betray them and give it to another one. Your choices in gameplay also matter. If you're able to stealth through an entire mission without raising an alarm, then it's going to hurt your reputation less than if you blast your way all the way through. So yeah, there's a surprising amount of choice and consequence that I wasn't expecting. Ubisoft gave us a little rundown before the demo explaining more how the rep system works. Good reputation with a faction gives you special loot specific to that syndicate. It also grants you access to restricted areas that you otherwise might not be able to access, legally at least. Bad reputation, on the other hand, makes a faction hostile towards you, even to the point where they hire bounty hunters to come after you. I didn't get to see the bad rep consequence in action, but I did get to see what good reputation earns you. Because I sided with the Crimson Dawn in the first mission, this gave me access to their district in the city of Miragana. I wouldn't have been able to just walk through this area if I chose the Pike instead, which is a pretty cool consequence of the system. This also let me sneak around in an even more restricted zone and snoop around further. So this is not a binary system of good or bad. There's several gray layers here where you can exploit your good reputation and double-cross factions that you work with. I'm really interested to see how deep this system goes in the full game. It sounds like it's possible to find a sweet spot where most of these factions will give you just enough access to where you can take advantage and make a lot of credits. That's going to be my plan, at least. Another part of that scoundrel fantasy is the world design. Does it feel dark and seedy like you'd expect? And I'm happy to confirm that yes, it definitely does. I wrote down on my notes that Outlaws has really great environmental design, and the best place to see that is in Miragana. You walk through this dimly lit city with plumes of smoke puffing around you. The McCall gambling parlor in town is bustling with outlaws, where you can hear murmurs of the activities of each syndicate in town. There's just an impressive level of detail here in the volume of NPCs and in the scale of this place. I visited several vendors around town and even helped one who was being shaken down by the Empire, which felt like a nice touch. I could have spent a lot more time here though, but from what I did see, Miragana felt alive and realistic for a city. Now, Ubi told us there's a lot of mini games in this game, but the only one I found and recorded during the session is this Kanto Fathier racetrack, which is basically just horse race betting. It's cool though because you're not just picking names and colors, you get to look at each one of their forms and their race history, so you can make like an informed decision. Later on in the demo, I found a note that tells you which one of these Fathiers to bet on, which felt cool, but too bad, I already lost 50 credits on Double Time, who came in last place. We haven't talked about gameplay yet. What are you actually doing moment to moment in this game? Ubisoft highlighted 3 pillars of their scoundrel gameplay to me. They said it's all about the blaster, the data spike, and the grappling hook, or more broadly, platforming. And after playing, yes, that's basically what it does boil down to. You're shooting bad guys with the blaster, you're lockpicking doors and hacking computers, and you're traversing the world. There's a sort of simplicity to it where it doesn't feel bogged down by RPG systems. You're not slowing down to loot blasters, for example, off the ground with like 46 elemental damage or anything silly like that. Everything feels action first. I'd argue there's another big fourth pillar to gameplay, and that's stealth. Almost every combat scenario I was in, you could crouch down behind cover and avoid enemies. The level design is made in such a way that there are multiple paths that you can take through each area if you want to go stealth first. There's a one-shot melee takedown if you're able to get in range behind enemies. You can use your companion Nyx to cause a distraction or blow something up in order to slip by. During my gameplay, I really wanted to test the stealth out, so I went silent first as much as possible. And for the most part, this worked well for me. There's certainly tools here to make stealth viable, like the blaster ability that one-shots enemies in stealth. You have binoculars that you can use to mark enemies from a distance and keep track of their movements. There's tall grass to sneak into in addition to normal cover. And you can even tell Nyx to go and loot an item across the room if you don't want to risk going there yourself. Alternatively, if you do get seen, combat is pretty straightforward. I was, again, pleasantly surprised that enemies die quickly. If you're able to hit headshots, they went down in, I think, 2 hits, so it felt like I was being rewarded for accuracy, and there weren't any bullet sponge enemies from what I played. The blaster feels good to use, and you're able to upgrade it to do different kinds of shots. For example, the Ion mode is good against shields, and you can also use it for puzzles. There's a power mode for the blaster too, but I didn't get to check that out. If you're wondering, the blaster is Kay's primary weapon in the game. There are ground weapons that you can pick up and use, but when you mount your speeder, for example, she's just going to drop whatever she's carrying, so they're basically just temporary weapons that can turn the tide of a fight. Kay has a special move that recharges over time. It's basically a quick draw where you mark targets and then she takes them down in quick succession, which felt pretty familiar to me. And then you can throw grenades too. That's also an option in your arsenal. Now, I will say it seemed like there wasn't much enemy variety. Maybe it was just the sections that I played, but yeah, you've got your grenade enemies, you've got your guys that call for reinforcements, but for the most part, it felt like I was fighting the same enemy the whole time, even on different planets. So hopefully there's some more variety in the main game. The next pillar to this gameplay is the hacking. Kay has a data spike that she can use to override locks and hack into computers. And there's a mini game associated with each of these. When you've got a locked door or vent, you have to play what feels like a rhythm game and match the tempo of the colors. And when you hit a certain number of beats in a row, the lock opens. I found this to be pretty intuitive. Finally, my years of Guitar Hero experience came in handy. For the computers, you have to play what is essentially Wordle, but with symbols. And even though I know Wordle, I've played it, this confused my brain the first several times I did it. There also didn't seem to be consequences for failing, from what I could tell at least. But both of these have pretty substantial help screens, so if you're struggling with them, there is a tutorial associated with it that should help. With minigames like these, it's all about frequency. As long as they're spread out and I'm not having to do it every 2 minutes, then I have fun with them. And this demo did feel like they were spread out enough to where they weren't annoying me. Finally, there's platforming. Kay can climb onto ledges and across specific handholds, but she can also use her grapple on specific points in the environment to swing across or scale up and down. And there's really not much else to say about this one. It feels super familiar, it's easy to use. If you've played a video game in the last 5 to 10 years, you know what you're doing. So I guess the question is, does all of this work together? And pretty much, yeah. I mean, the jumping, shooting, the hacking, and sneaking, it all blends well together. Star Wars Outlaws it's definitely a fun game to play moment to moment, and like I said, I appreciate that they didn't go the full RPG route with the gameplay, because that's very easy to do with open world games these days. This could have easily been a looter where you're going around and just opening stuff and, equipping various pieces that are progressively better. Now, there is some looting, there is some equipment, but it's very, very light and it didn't slow anything down. That's always the worry with these types of games for me, and luckily that's not the case here. Let's talk about this open world. I was skeptical about how open this game would be, when I first saw gameplay, but playing it myself got rid of my worries completely, because Tashara, the first planet I played on, it's completely open, and since you get the speeder immediately, you can hop on and ride this thing from one end of the map to the other. There's a ton of different points of interest, like this power station outside of Miragana, where I checked out a vendor's stock and found a mission from this NPC. They told me about an old wind tunnel where I might find some valuable artifacts. I also went inside and leaned against the bar and overheard these people talking about a waterfall stash, but unfortunately, neither area was available in the demo, so I couldn't go and check those things out. But while I was exploring, I got a distress call from farmers being attacked nearby, and so I decided to go and help. I picked up this ridiculous grenade launcher and wiped out the bad guys pretty easily. This thing felt insanely powerful. After that, I hopped back onto my speeder and explored some more. I found out the hard way that it's possible for parts of the open world to belong to certain factions. So if you ride through Pike territory and you have a poor reputation with that faction like I did, they're gonna chase you down and try to kill you. Fortunately, you can use the quick draw ability to blow them to smithereens. And this is something that was a little weird for me at first. I was like, wait a second, how do you turn around and shoot these guys on the speeder? You can't manually pull out your blaster and shoot people on the speeder, which for me was a little disappointing, but it is kind of cool to see these mini cutscenes using the quick draw ability. The next mission I did takes place entirely within Miragana. And I like this one because it shows how this city isn't just a zone for vendors and story cutscenes, but it's a real place where the factions have a legitimate presence. They own a part of the city, a district entirely. I needed to upgrade my blaster in order to progress the main story, but Kay finds out that the only way to find that part is to steal it from the Pikes or the Crimson Dawn. Now here I had an interesting choice to make. I could sneak into the Pike district and further damage my already bad reputation with them, or I could take advantage of my good reputation with the Crimson Dawn and walk right through the front door and steal it from under their noses. And I thought that was the more interesting of the two, so I went down that route. Now, luckily, it wasn't as easy as just walking in and looting it. There are more restricted zones in the faction districts where you can't just walk in even with your good reputation. So here I had to sneak around, silently take down an enemy or two, and make my way into the vault area. This is where I found the blaster part that I needed, but since I was there, I went ahead and hacked this computer and learned that there's a way to crack open the restricted vault here. So there was another interesting choice. I have a good reputation with this faction, but I can exploit it further and do some more risky things if I want to get whatever's in that box. But for now, I made my way out, and since I wasn't seen at all, I didn't damage my good reputation with the Crimson Dawn. That was the mission that allows you to leave Tashara and take your ship, the Trailblazer, out into orbit and explore the rest of the Outer Rim. And of course, I really wanted to see exactly how this works. From the first gameplay I saw of Outlaws, I was curious whether there's a cutscene here or whether or not it's a seamless transition between surface and space. And the truth is somewhere in between, I would say. You get a cutscene for the takeoff, and then you've got this period where you travel through the atmosphere for a bit, and then you're in space and you have control immediately. I'll admit it really makes a difference that this doesn't cut to black like a traditional loading screen, even if the atmosphere part is like a glorified loading screen, if we're being honest. But generally, I really like what they did here. It looks good, and it's much better, like I said, than the alternative. This is where my demoist stopped me. The first 3 hours were over. It was time to jump to the last mission for the demo on Kajimi. But before we got there, I started in space and I got to experience the ship gameplay. So this is what it looks like to fly in orbit. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can ping for nearby destinations. You can boost to move more quickly. And of course, you can fight. Now, when I was pinging and looking around, there was a lot of different things I could do just within the orbit of this one planet. I decided to move along because of, the time constraints, but it did seem like there was plenty of exploring to do in the ship, which felt cool. Before I moved on, though, I picked some fights with some of the ships on the way to the planet, and I found myself liking this ship combat. The way it works is once you aim at a target and kind of lock on, The game sort of steers the ship for you, so you can focus on leading your shots in order to hit your targets. And after a while, it becomes a mix of like knowing when to evade enemy fire and when to hone in and take out enemies. A couple of times my shields were disabled, but I never really got punished for it. I just sort of waited and then everything was fine. Eventually, I fended them off and continued my way towards Kajimi. And from this scene here, I think they really nailed the look of planets from space. It really feels grand and mysterious in a way that's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. Once you get into orbit with a planet, you have to select a destination, so I'm assuming there's going to be multiple landing points on some of the maps. Once you select one, the game takes over controls and brings you in for the landing. Here in Kajimi City, Kei's mission is to find a safecracker named Enk. This is our first introduction to the Ashiga clan as one of the game's main crime syndicates, but the Crimson Dawn also have a presence on Kajimi. Now, for full transparency, I had already played this mission before. When I went to LA to play Assassin's Creed Shadows, I also got to play Star Wars Outlaws. But what I wasn't allowed to do was explore the city like I did this time. And what I found felt pretty similar to Miragana. There's lots of different pathways here. There's lots of side content to explore. I found this Imperial officer who offered to lower my wanted level if I ever got into trouble, which felt pretty cool. In the bar, I found this broker who gives out contracts from the various syndicates, and that rewards you with credits and reputation. Again, I tried to do one of these, but I ran into the same problem as I had on Tashara. The area for this was off limits for the demo, so I wasn't able to do it. Back to the mission. Enk is in debt to the Ashiga clan, so I had to sneak into one of their places and hack a terminal to find her location. At this point, I felt like I was getting better at stealth, so it was easier to move through areas undetected. After finding the terminal, I discovered that the Crimson Dawn stole a relic from the Ashiga clan, so the new plan was to sneak into the Crimson Dawn HQ, steal back the relic for Ashiga, and use that to exchange the information for the safecracker's location. This is a mission where even if you manage to steal the relic undetected, you pretty much get forced into a firefight, so I had to fight my way out of there. Now, the end of this mission doesn't give you a choice on who to side with, so it feels like whenever the main story is involved, sometimes you may not get to make those decisions. Kei gives Ashiga the relic in exchange for Enk's location and a promise to work together in the future. And that is everything I played for Star Wars Outlaws. So, what do I think after 4 hours of gameplay? I walked away feeling confident that both the story and the reputation systems in this game are interesting enough to carry it forward. I like Star Wars, but I wouldn't consider myself a fan or anything like that. So for me, I was more focused on how is this open world game going to be different and what's going to set this apart. For me, it's pretty simply the reputation system. That's the game changer in this game. It's making interesting choices and seeing how they play out and affect the story, and seeing how they affect the gameplay and how you approach different missions. I would say that's a fairly unique concept for a Ubisoft game, because generally speaking, they make pretty games with pretty environments that are easy to play, but you don't get that choice-based, gameplay and consequences. I was surprised when Outlaws made me weigh my decisions and think about what I was doing. And hopefully those choices will be as interesting throughout the main game as they were in this demo. That is all I've got for this video, guys. Once again, thanks to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. You can pre-order Star Wars Outlaws now by clicking the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button. Also, subscribe for more videos like this and ring the bell so you don't miss my next one. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.